Okay, hi everyone. I have driven south to the town of New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is about as far south as you can go in the state of Massachusetts. I'm here at a place called Fort Rodman, which is a Civil War era fort, but I'm not here for a history tour. I'm here to look for a European vagrant, which is a bird called a Northern Lapwing. This bird has been here for a few weeks now, and I feel kind of like I should have come to look for it already. It's a long drive for me, and logistically it just hasn't worked out until today. So I'm going to be looking for it here. I don't know exactly where to look. Apparently it moves around a bit, but the location is not huge. It's kind of out on a spit of land into the water. So I'll wander around and see what I can see, and fingers crossed I can find this neat shorebird. I started walking along a path that went all the way around the fort close to the ocean, and the first birds I saw were a large flock of brant geese. As you can see, the ocean was very calm today. According to eBird reports, the lapwing was often seen in the grassy areas around the fort. I didn't see the lapwing, but I did notice a flock of smaller birds that turned out to be horned larks. I soon realized that there was a handful of Lapland longspurs mixed in with the larks, as is often the case. I had already seen a mixed flock of larks and longspurs this year and added both to the year list. However, I was interested in getting some better footage of the longspurs so I could add them to the channel life list. Fortunately, this flock was a bit less nervous and flighty than the previous flock I had seen, and I was able to get some decent footage of the longspurs. So, at a minimum, I was going to get a channel lifer out of this trip. Continuing along the path that circled the fort, I kept scanning for the northern lapwing, both along the rocky shoreline and in the grassy area, but without any luck. I did come across a mixed flock of ducks and geese that included several gadwall. That's a pretty common duck species in Massachusetts, but a new one for the year list. This handsome male common eider was relaxing on a rock. Overall, this location was so quiet and sleepy that I was about ready to lie down on the grass and take a nap. I continued walking around the fort, making a complete circuit and checking some of the other areas mentioned in previous eBird reports, such as this playground. Then I made a second complete circuit, still with no sign of the lapwing. Just when I was starting to get that sinking feeling that I was going to dip on the bird, I came across a couple of guys with cameras and a spotting scope, and they told me that they had located the lapwing on a rock jetty some distance away from the fort. I found it in my binoculars, and then I grabbed a few photos at full zoom. The lapwing is perched out at the end of the jetty right here. Excellent news, but too far away to get any decent photos or video. Fortunately, it was possible to get much closer by walking along the beach, which of course I did. Eventually I reached the base of the rock jetty, and I was able to get some better shots. This is a wide-angle shot with my phone, and you can just make out the lapwing way out at the end. Using my birding camera and cropping into the footage gave some reasonably good looks. This bird is about the size and shape of a killdeer, but with an iridescent greenish back and, of course, the cute little crest. Northern Lapwings breed in Europe and Asia and winter in large numbers in Western Europe, where they form large flocks and can be quite abundant. This individual was carried over to the New England coast during a period of unusual eastern winds in late December, and it's been seen regularly here at Fort Rodman since mid-January. Northern Lapwing is an ABA Code 4 bird, which means that they're found in the ABA area only once every few years on average. Okay, that was really cool. I got the Northern Lapwing. It took me about an hour and a half of waiting before I finally came across a couple of birders who were looking way off into the distance on a jetty that was not really at Fort Rodman. It was, a little ways up the access road to get here. So at first I thought I was only going to get extremely distant photos, but then I realized that you could walk along the beach quite a ways towards the jetty, so I did that. And as you saw, I got reasonably good footage. The bird was angled a little bit away, but what a fantastic looking bird with that green sheen on the body and of course the little crest of feathers. So that's awesome. That's not a lifer, but that is an ABA area lifer for me, and of course a Massachusetts state lifer for me. So great bird to see, and obviously a good one for the list. So successful trip here to Fort Rodman in New Bedford, Massachusetts. This next trip took place 6 days before the trip to see the lapwing. Hi everyone, it's a Sunday afternoon and I have come to Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is one of the best known birding spots in the state actually, because it is a migrant trap. So in the spring it's a really great spot for warblers, because the warblers that are migrating over the Boston area see this one green area below and then they come down and get concentrated in this area. That's not happening right now. It's early February and there's no migration happening. But the reason I'm here is an orange-crowned warbler has been overwintering here and coming pretty regularly to the suet feeders that are kept filled here by the staff. So I'm going to be looking for that, and I'm going to just generally be looking for anything I can find here. This is a nice birding spot. There's a lot of green here, a lot of trees and bushes. There's a lot of food here for birds. So I'm actually thinking there's going to be quite a few other birds here as well. So we'll see what we can find. I parked near the reported location of the orange-crowned warbler and started looking for the feeders. But I was immediately distracted by the repeated calls of a nearby yellow-bellied sapsucker. This can be a fairly tricky bird to find in photographs, so I was excited by the possibility of getting it onto the year list. After standing directly under the sound of the calls for a while without seeing it, I finally spotted it, blending in well against the bark. The bird was quite busy sucking sap out of its little sap holes, so I was able to get long views. Based on the red throat, this is an adult male. Since sapsuckers tend to spend a long time perched in an exposed position on the side of a tree in order to feed, it makes sense that they have camouflaged plumage, especially on their back. I filmed from a few different angles, and I think this one shows the bird best. With help from another birder that I ran into, I was able to locate the feeders where the orange-crowned warbler had been seen, which were next to this small pond. The feeders were quite busy, as might be expected on a cold winter day. Dark-eyed juncos were hopping around under the feeder, and that's a new bird for the year list. Then a red-bellied woodpecker flew in, another new one for the year. I was able to get some great close-up footage of the woodpecker as it fed on the upside-down suet feeder. Although we do have to subtract some style points for the shiny metal squirrel baffle in the background.
Such a beautiful bird.
One thing I like about birding here is getting shots of birds perched on the stonework like this American robin. And this European starling. After about half an hour of watching the feeders with no sign of the warbler, we decided to check out another nearby feeder. No luck there either, just a flock of white-throated sparrows. This one is waiting patiently for a squirrel to finish up at the feeder. It could be a long wait. There were also plenty of house sparrows at this urban birding location, which I remembered weren't on the year list yet, so let's fix that. I returned to the first feeder, which is the one the warbler was known to visit, and I started to realize that it was so busy that a tiny bird like a warbler was going to have a hard time ever getting a turn at the suet. So I decided to scan the surrounding area carefully. And almost immediately I spotted the Orange-Crowned Warbler waiting patiently for a chance to visit the feeder. Lucky for me, because this allowed me to get some nice footage on a natural perch. Orange-Crowned Warblers are uncommon in Massachusetts, so in addition to being an out-of-season sighting, this is actually a solid addition to the year list. You can actually see some orange in the crown of this bird, which is neat. Most of the birds I've seen in Massachusetts don't have any visible orange. All right, well that worked out really well. Did get the Orange-Crowned Warbler as you saw, and some other birds as well, so nice stop. And I just wanted to mention that I'm going to be coming back to Mount Auburn several times, I expect, during this year. This is such a great spot in spring migration. It's also really good for photography. There's a lot of low perches for the birds, and it's just generally an incredibly beautiful cemetery. The landscaping here is really amazing in the spring. It's just not showing it all right now in the winter, of course. So looking forward to doing some more birding here at Mount Auburn in the future. Okay, so after seeing that Northern Lapwing down in New Bedford, Massachusetts, I have driven an hour or so north to Quincy, which is just south of Boston, to a place called Nut Island, where there has been a female King Eider reported. So like many locations in Massachusetts that have island in the name, Nut Island is not actually an island because you can drive onto it, but it is a little spit of land that sticks out into the ocean. It's quite small. And I'm happy to report that I've already looked for and found the female King Eider. So that was nice, another good one for the list. I will now show some footage and go through the ID just a little bit because it is tricky to separate it from a female common eider. This is one of those species where the males are very different looking, but the females are actually quite similar. This location is really tiny, but it was surrounded by plenty of common eider, so it took a little while to find the king eider. I eventually found it swimming and diving by itself off the end of this concrete pier. It was a bit distant, but close enough that I could at least make a clear ID. King eider have a smaller bill and a rounder head than common eider, which have a very distinctive triangle-shaped head. This makes female king eider look a bit more like a regular duck. King eider are also smaller overall than common eider. Here a red-breasted merganser swims by, and I'll freeze the footage for a moment. You can see that they're basically the same size, whereas a common eider would appear noticeably larger than a red-breasted merganser. Here is the king eider on the left and a female common eider on the right. You can see the large difference in the shape of the head and bill. Okay, so this has been a great day, headlined, of course, by that Northern Lapwing, which is such a great rarity to see in Massachusetts, and then also the king eider is a nice bird as well. So I will now wrap this video up here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.